In this module, we're going to explore the topic of constraints in more detail. What they are, how they affect our systems, and why understanding them can unlock huge improvements in performance. So what exactly is a constraint? You might recall we described it as the weakest link in a chain. But in the context of a modern organization, it's a bit more nuanced. Simply put, a constraint is anything that limits our ability to achieve the system's goal. Or, as Dr. Goldratt defined it, anything that limits the system from achieving higher performance relative to its goal. Here's a key insight. Constraints can be internal or external. An internal constraint might be something like the capacity of a machine to produce parts. On the other hand, an external constraint is something outside your organization, like market demand for your product. Maybe you can produce more, but the market simply doesn't want it. Either way, both types of constraints limit your system's performance and must be addressed to make meaningful improvements. Here's something profound to think about. Most systems only have a few real constraints. Why? Because if a system had too many constraints, it would collapse under its own instability. This realization is a game changer. It means if we focus on improving the constraint, we can unlock massive improvements. Trying to fix non-constraints? Well, that could be a waste of time and effort, and it can actually make things worse. Let's break it down further. Constraints fall into two categories. Constraints that govern the throughput of the system, and constraints that govern the behavior of the system. Let's unpack each one with examples. First, constraints that govern the rate of throughput. These are things that limit the flow of products, services, or outcomes through your system. For instance, a physical capacity constraint could be a bottleneck machine that can't keep up with demand. Market demand could be a constraint if you can produce more than the market wants. Even suppliers of raw materials can constrain throughput, like we saw during the pandemic with shortages of things like PPE, laptops, and other goods. And sometimes constraints are deliberate. Luxury car brands, for example, sometimes restrict supply to create scarcity and enhance brand value. People are happy to wait months or even years for that special car. In project environments, the constraint is often time. Completing projects faster means achieving benefits sooner, which directly improves system performance. TOC has a whole methodology for project management, but for now, just remember, reducing project completion time improves throughput. Next, let's talk about constraints that govern the system's behavior. These determine how your system operates and include factors like legal and regulatory controls, such as health and safety laws or environmental regulations. Organizational policies, like accounting rules or maternity policies. Some constraints, like laws, can't be changed and we wouldn't necessarily want to. But many internal policies are often self-imposed, meaning we have flexibility to adapt them for better results. And then there's culture. Every organization and every region has norms and behaviors that influence how things get done. For example, working hours differ around the world. In Hong Kong, it's common to work Monday to Friday and Saturday morning. In many European countries, Saturday work in addition to the normal working week would be unusual. These cultural factors can shape how much of our goal units we can generate. All right, let's recap what we've learned in this module. A constraint is anything that limits the system from achieving higher performance relative to its goal. Constraints can be internal or external, but systems have very few real constraints. A system with many constraints would soon collapse due to its own instability. This is a game-changing realization that enables us to truly focus on the very few things that prevent us from achieving more of our goal. Improving the performance of the constraint will improve the performance of the system as a whole. Improving the performance of a non-constraint will not improve the performance of the system as a whole, and it may even make performance worse. There are two types of constraint. Those that govern throughput, like capacity or market demand, and those that govern the system's behavior, like laws, policies, and cultural norms. By focusing on the real constraints, we can improve system performance in significant, measurable ways. That's it for this module. In our next session, we'll dive into how to improve the performance of the system's constraint.